Microphone on. Right, welcome to Rugby Borough Council's Planning Committee meeting this Wednesday the 19th of July. I'm Councillor Tony Gillies, the Chair of this committee. The meeting is being web streamed to the public through the Council's YouTube channel. During the meeting, when asked to speak, please indicate that you wish to speak and push the talk button on the microphone in front of you. This will allow the camera to pan in your general direction and everyone to hear you. Before we begin the formal agenda, I'm obliged to read out the following fire notice. There is no fire drill scheduled in the building this evening. If the fire alarm sounds, then please could I ask that you make your way out of the building, down the main staircase and out of the main doors of the Town Hall, and can congregate at the entrance to Caldecott Park. An officer of the Council will give instructions on when it is safe to return to the building. Moving on to the agenda, the first item of business is to approve the minutes held on the 21st of June. All those in favour, please show. Okay, that's unanimous. Second item is apologies for absence.
Two apologies for tonight's meeting from Councillors Mrs Garcia and Caradia. Their substitutes respectively are Councillors Larassel and Mistry.
Thank you. Move on to declarations of interest. To receive the declarations of interest as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for Councillors. Non-pecuniary interest, and I'll start off with R22/0207 at Bentley Woods as a ward councillor, and R23/0282 Buyout Place as a councillor. Councillor Sanderson.
Sorry, Chair. Buyout Place 0282, by virtue of being a councillor for Eastlands Ward.
Councillor Srivastava.
Just ward councillor, so R23078.
Councillor Edwards.
To Councillor Sanderson, I'm the councillor in Eastlands Ward.
Yeah, Councillor Mowlis.
Yeah, thank you. Buyout Place R230282 as a councillor for Rugby. Thank you.
Councillor Ward.
Exactly the same, R230282 as a councillor.
So for the benefit of the minutes, sorry, Councillor Hassel, can I just clarify that those declarations as ward councillors or councillors are that you have no tendency or inclination that could prevent impartial consideration of the application, and that you're here open-minded and listen to all sides before making that determination?
Councillor Lawrence.
Repeating those words, if I can, so yes, on R230282 as a councillor for Rugby.
Could I ask Councillor Edwards to cancel his microphone? Councillor Eve Hassel.
R220238 as a councillor for Rugby, Buyout Place.
Councillor Bill Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just as a councillor, the words have already been spoken for R230282.
Councillor Harrington.
Ditto.
Anybody else? Okay, right. Let's move on then to pecuniary interests. Nope. And then notice under Section 106 Local Government Finance Act 1992, non-payment of community charge or council tax. We're all innocent on that. Good. Before we move on to items for consideration, we'll just read out the rules for public speaking. The order in which each item will be dealt with: first, the planning officer will speak first and present the application. The committee will be asked if they have any points of clarification from the officer. The representatives for the objectors, the applicants and then the ward councillor will each be invited to speak. The planning officer can address any material issues arising from speakers' comments and accept questions from councillors. Any ward councillor or councillor who speaks on an application as part of the public speaking process shall leave the meeting once all speakers have completed their presentations relating to it. The committee will then go into debate on the application, asking relevant questions of the planning officer if necessary. A formal recommendation will be made and voted upon. Rules of public speaking. Speakers will have 3 minutes to make their presentation. They'll be warned by a short alarm when they have 30 seconds left, and then further alarm will sound when their time has expired. Their presentation should then be brought to a halt. No extra time will be allowed. All speakers should direct their presentations to amplifying the planning matters they have previously brought to us for the benefit of the committee. Speakers shall restrict their comments to material planning considerations only. Any non-planning issues will be disregarded. Speakers should not introduce any additional information that has not previously been brought to the planning authority's attention, i.e. introduce late items that have not been suitably considered by officers and properly addressed in the officer's report to the committee for councillors' deliberation. No visual aids or handouts may be used, and no questions to officers or councillors will be allowed. No members of the public are allowed to take part in the debate once their presentation has been given. And now we'll move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is applications for consideration. And the first one we have is Bentley Woods Service Station, and Lucy is to present.
The first application being brought to the committee this evening is application R220207, and the site encompasses the Bentley Woods Service Centre and 64 Rugby Road in Bentley Woods. The application is for the demolition of the existing single and two-storey car sales, the workshop and car wash premises, and the demolition of the existing two-storey dwelling at number 64 Rugby Road, and therefore the residential redevelopment of the site, consisting of 2 apartment buildings, which would consist of 28 units in total, and the associated external works. This is a Google aerial view. If I use the pointer, this is the boundary with 58 Rugby Road. The site follows round, then we have a slight dip towards Oakdale Court, and then around them between 64 and 66 Rugby Road. Moving on to site photographs, on the left you can see the two-storey car sales building and part of the canopy, and then on the right hand side is the canopy then towards 58 Rugby Road. We then have a street scene which shows 66, and then which is the white dwelling. This next one is the one that's proposed for demolition. You can see the canopy here and then further along the road. The right hand side image, this is from the rear of the site, then looking towards the rear of 58 Rugby Road on the left, and again further within the rear of the site towards number 66 Rugby Road. I would note that the photograph of number 58 is prior to extensions that are currently taking place to it, but there's no alterations to the side. There'll be no windows proposed on that side. Again, then, this is just a selection of photographs throughout the site of the elements of demolition. The application has been changed from the original submission. There was work and reconsultation carried out in regards to that was originally brought to the local authority. So just to make you aware that on the original submission, there was a bin store area proposed to the front with all the cycle parking for visitors together at the front. There was additionally parking at the side of this block. There's also more tandem parking much closer to the residential blocks proposed. The original submission also included a much higher height of the building, and the massing of that was not considered acceptable. Therefore, moving on to the proposed site plan, you can see here that there's more landscaping proposed. The green, as it looks as a dot on this, is the electric car charging points proposed. There's visitor cycle racks proposed at the front of the site, with the bin storage for the proposed residents now to the rear, and the emptying of that would be carried out by a private company. This then provides the floor plans. Now, across the two blocks, as I've stated, it was originally a submission for 32, and due to the amendments that was carried out, this dropped to 28 units in total. There's 14 proposed in each block, and this includes 16 either one-bed or studio units, and then 12 two-bedroom units. As previously mentioned, there has been changes to the design, which has resulted in less units. There's been dropped height to that originally proposed, with the alteration to the roof height and line closer to those adjacent, and there is the features proposed on the elevations and material changes to break up the elevation of the building. For reference, this is an illustration of the existing street scene, but as previously mentioned, it does show 58 prior to its extension. This was the proposed, and then this is the proposed. Then for note, this is to show, this is the, on the top is the proposed prior to the amendments that shows the higher height, and then for reference the amended scheme, which is for consideration this evening. In terms of the key considerations of the application site is located within the boundary of the main rural settlement of Bentley Woods, and therefore the principle of development complies with that of policy GP2 of the local plan. In terms of the residential amenity and the previous use of the site, there is conditions provided for environmental health relating to contaminated land and noise, and plus a demolition and construction management plan. The design of the bin storage area is also conditioned and, as previously stated, proposed to be carried out by a private company. Each unit proposed within the two blocks meets the national space standard for the residential amenity of the potential future occupiers. As outlined in the officer report and in the topics discussed, there has been objection received from local residents. From those that are on the other side of Rugby Road and to the rear of the site in Oakdale Court, there's over 20 metres or more of separation distance, and then with the intervening features, it is considered that there would not be an impact on those in terms of overlooking. Moving towards the adjacent dwellings, with the proposed extension that is being undertaken at 58, and with the design of the proposal, it is not considered that this property would be impacted by overlooking or by the development and on the impact of the residential amenity. With 66 Rugby Road, as outlined in the report, with the design, there is noted an impact in regards to the rear in terms of light, but on balance it is considered that this is acceptable. The proposal would move the site from an existing sui generis use to a residential use within a residential area. Another aspect that was raised in terms of the objections related to car parking provision. That proposed on the site meets the planning policies and the appendices of the local plan based on the accommodation that is proposed. There's also the electric charging points that are conditioned to be provided on site. Whilst car parking spaces will include provision for electric car charging, they won't be restricted to only be used by electric vehicles, so they could be used by all. One of the objections related to no visitor parking provided as part of the scheme. This is not a requirement of the local plan at any residential development, so therefore complies. The cycle parking and storage to the front of the site is for visitor cycle parking in line with the local plan, and secure and covered cycle parking is proposed in storage area to the rear for the proposed residents in line with the local plan. Warwickshire County Council Highways have no objection to the scheme as is presented to the committee, and also there is conditions based on the improved cycle scheme that's being carried out by Warwickshire County Council Highways in the area, and the conditions will ensure that the proposed new access of this scheme link into that development. The other matters as listed on the slide have been addressed in the officer report with associated conditions to ensure that the proposal is considered acceptable and suitably addressed. Based on the landscaping and the redevelopment of the scheme, there can be a biodiversity net gain achieved on site. In terms of the planning obligations, all of those that were requested have been outlined in full detail in the report. Of those that are considered to meet all the necessary requests, this relates to Warwickshire County Council, libraries and education and affordable housing, as well as the monitoring costs of the local authority and the County Council. In line with the presumption of sustainable development, with construction jobs, new spending, council tax and the redevelopment of the scheme, adding an additional accommodation type to the main rural settlement and the housing mix of the borough, with the environmental biodiversity gain and units in a sustainable location with direct access to a cycleway. On balance, the application is presented to the committee with a recommendation for approval, subject to the points as outlined on the screen. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Now, this, of course, was a subject for a site visit earlier this afternoon, and I know one or two of you probably didn't make the site visit, so we've got some points of... if you've got any points of clarification for the officer, please indicate and ask them now. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chair. I know, obviously, at the site visit we were looking today. Could I just have a look again at the, the entrance to the site? Because I wasn't sure if it was a, so whether it's a single file entrance and exit, but then trying to look, is it a bit wider at the beginning?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Following that point that was raised, I did go back and review what had been provided by Warwickshire County Council Highways. There is the space that they require from the highway into the site for two vehicles to be able to pass each other at this front part of the access. It does then thin further within the site, but as the access to Rugby Road, there is sufficient space for vehicles to pass each other. So
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Any other points of clarification for anybody? No? Okay, and then in that case, then we'll move on to... We've got speakers on this. We'll move on to Councillor Paul Salisbury, who's going to speak. You've got 3 minutes.
Thank you for allowing me to speak and put the objections from Bentley Woods Parish Council opposing the proposal. The amended plans are for 1, 2 and 3 person apartments, which could house 56 residents in total. Parking provision is for 36 cars, of which 8 are in tandem, creating the need for 20 vehicles parking off-site. Talks are already ongoing with Warwickshire County Council about the over-density of parking in 5 other areas within Bentley Woods. This site will create even further concern. Provision for visitors parking is a visitors cycle rack. Can I ask how many councillors make all their visits on their bicycles? This entire overspill will be along the A428 and into the already congested side roads, causing even more traffic hazards. The A428 Rugby Road is a main corridor route for emergency vehicles from Rugby St Cross to Walsgrave Hospital. Any parking on this road would cause great health concerns. The site is approximately 300 metres from the A46, a major trunk road, and 200 metres from Broad Street Rugby Club, whose events already cause congestion around the area. The parking on site is not adequate. With a number of these spaces in tandem, there is little or no space to manoeuvre and turn around on the site, which creates further safety issues if reversing out on the A428. These stating problems will not only affect our residents, but everybody who travels this route from Rugby to Coventry. The development is highly intrusive and overbearing to the street scene and not in keeping and completely out of character with the rest of the village. The Rugby Road currently contains 2-storey dwelling houses with large front gardens. This application proposes cycle racks on the front, which will give rise to antisocial behaviour. The proposal shows little or no thought for the community and is extremely detrimental to a rural village. It is a proposal that will give the maximum financial gain whilst creating the maximum disruption for the community. There is also a danger of creating a precedent in respect of similar future proposals. Approval will exacerbate an already overstretched infrastructure, as there are no doctors or health centres within the village. There is no provision for outdoor space or amenities within the proposal for residents or children, and no health and well-being catered for. Children will play in the parking area at the rear, placing them in danger of accidents from manoeuvring vehicles or on the frontage with the dangers of passing traffic. This supports the previous statement of no thought for the community. Finally, we are not attempting to stand in the way of progress. The site is well overdue for development, but not overdevelopment. Should a number of houses or even much needed bungalows be proposed, this would meet the community's requirements and attract some approval. The proposal as it stands will only cause concern, problems and future disruption around an already busy area. Taking this into consideration, we hope you will take note of our concerns and reject the application as it stands. Thank you.
Thank you indeed. Thank you. We'll now move on to Mr. George Smith, the planning agent.
Thank you, Chair. My name is George Smith. I'm a Chartered Town Planner and speaking on behalf of the applicant, who owns the application site. We thank the case officer for her well-written and thorough report, and also ask that you take into consideration the following points when considering the application this evening. Firstly, the current use of the site is not compatible with the surrounding area, as evidenced by the history of complaints. As members have seen earlier this afternoon, the site still operates an MOT car wash and sales centre, which generates a high number of vehicle movements throughout the day, with associated noise and environmental impacts on neighbours. Its removal and replacement with homes will be of benefit to the amenity of the local area and residents. Secondly, redevelopment for an alternative employment use or for a lower number of flats or houses would not be financially viable. The cost of clearance and remediation of the site is significant. Therefore, if this application is not supported, the likelihood is the site would continue to be used as an MOT centre. Thirdly, the applicant has amended and reduced the scale of the proposals to minimise its impact on the area. Following the submission of the application last year, the applicant has worked proactively with the case officer. The applicant has reduced the number of homes proposed and reduced the height and massing of the proposed buildings in response to requests from the case officer. Changes have also been made to the roof form elevations to blend the buildings into the street scene and to match the ridge line with numbers 66 and 58 as is currently being built. The proposals before you will enhance the character of the area compared to the existing buildings and is not an overdevelopment of the site. Fourthly, there are no technical objections to the application. The highways officer is satisfied with the proposal will not result in adverse impact on highway safety and that the parking spaces comply with their standards and Rugby's planning obligations SPD. The county flood risk officers are also satisfied with the scheme following the receipt of acceptable surface water drainage details. The scheme accords with all local and national plans, policies and guidance. Finally, the proposal will improve the mix of housing available in Bentley Woods, where there are currently a high proportion of 3 to 4 bedroom properties. The homes will provide an opportunity for older residents to downsize and for younger residents to find a place of their own while staying in Bentley Woods. 6 units are also proposed to be affordable homes, compliant with Policy H2. In summary, the removal of the existing use will improve the amenity of the area for local people. The proposed development has been amended and reduced as requested by the case officer, so the design is considered to enhance the character of the area. The mix of homes provided will be of benefit to local people, including the provision of 6 affordable homes. No objections have been made by technical consultees, and we respectfully request the application is approved in accordance with your officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll move on now to Councillor Heather Timms, Ward Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, this scheme does not add to the overall quality of development on Rugby Road, Bentley Woods. There is a housing mix on the road, but all the properties are either terrace, semi-detached or detached. None are flats and none have Juliet balconies visible from the road. There is no back garden development along this road, and this is what this is by another name. It is an overdevelopment of the site, as all housing need has been met in the village, including flats and bungalows, and indeed the 5-year supply for the borough is being met. This is build them high and build as many as possible with little or no environmental considerations, including there's no solar and they're going to put gas boilers in. There is also the loss of a business in the village, which is well used, including the car wash, car servicing and the car sales area. Yellow lines are in process of going in to restrict parking at all the junctions along Rugby Road, including Oakdale, which is the nearest secondary road. This road already suffers from a high level of residential and visitor parking through to Brandon Woods. There is insufficient parking on this site for visitors, and they will arrive by car and park in adjoining roads. The A428 is a very busy road, which it is not safe to park on. Refuse collection is apparently to be done by a private contractor, so that development of this site avoids complying with the normal standards of access to a site for dustbin collection. That's why that road's so narrow. Quality? Yeah, right. There is a loss of light pointed out in the report to adjoining buildings, and this is a planning matter. This has just been dismissed by saying it is okay for the majority of the time. But summer evenings, there will be a loss of light to adjacent buildings and gardens. More consideration should be given to loss of amenity for adjoining residents. It is a residential street where normally the gardens are back to back, so developing the rear of the site for parking will give noise issues for those with adjoining gardens from at least 36 vehicles. What you have to consider is the noise from the existing business would normally cease outside of normal business hours, but this will be constant, 24/7. The parish council has to maintain all of the public open space in the village. There'll be nowhere for the children to play on this, and money should be provided for the ongoing maintenance of these. There is none provided in this report, so at least you need to look at those conditions. Finally, this is an overdevelopment of the site which will cause parking, noise and a loss of quality of the housing provision on the Rugby Road, Bentley Woods. So I ask you to refuse it.
Thanks for that. Now, all the three speakers raised a number of points there. If any members feel those points need to be clarified by the officer, then please indicate. If not, then we'll go into debate, which means Councillor Heather-Timms will have to disappear. Say the magic words. Okay, have we got any speakers to begin with? Councillor Eve Hassel.
As the driveway which cars cannot pass by is so narrow, I wonder what will happen to cars that cannot get into the site off the main road. They will be backing up surely onto the main Rugby Road.
There is the space, at least for 2 vehicles, possibly 3, to be able to come off the road. There is considered by the road safety audit that there will be less movement at the site compared to that there currently. So that will have been reviewed as to whether the Highway Authority were content with the access, and they've provided no objection as our statutory consultee on that matter.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I thought the site visit was very informative in terms of what we actually saw. What we saw was a very, very busy site indeed, with both car repairs, car showrooms, car washing, motorcycles, and various other uses being put to the current site, which must be generating a considerable amount of traffic onto the Rugby Road. My view, should the development go forward, then I would expect to see a reduction in traffic going on to that road, not the opposite. A bit amused by the comment that cycle racks would cause antisocial behaviour, since cycle racks are a static object and can't actually cause antisocial behaviour of their own accord. That requires people to do that. Overall, I think this is a well thought out scheme if you consider it's not only the garage and the repair shop that's going, it's also the detached building at the side. So I think the officer's recommendation is well considered, and quite frankly I've never seen an application with so many informatives attached to it. For a point to clarify what the conditions are, I can't see why there seems to be a problem with this application from the parish council.
Councillor Lawrence.
Maybe in response to that comment about there being so many mitigations, it feels like a bit of a square peg to me. It's been cut and cut and cut to try and make it fit into planning law. So I think I'll go back a bit and say, right, this is a 3-storey building. There is nothing 3-storey along this strip. So it feels, even if you cut down its height, it's still a 3-storey building. So it's inappropriate in its massing and its density. Now that's an opinion, but that's opinion I see to this. It's not fitting the fact that most of the buildings along that street in a rural environment are not of this type. So I think there is an argument that there would be a more appropriate design for this space. So I think there's planning balance here. I'm asked to look at social. There isn't a social need here for the borough to have more housing. We've met our need. There is an environmental thing, but as we've just heard, there's no going to be gas boilers in this place. It's not actually hitting any of the environmental metrics I hear. And then economic. It's taking out a very viable business, a business that many people have used in this environment, offering that service to those people. So I don't think it meets the criteria for planning balance as far as I can see. So, yeah, the cycle path isn't in existence yet, so it can't be part of this planning decision. So I can dismiss that one as well. So at the moment I'm inclined to, and would propose to, reject the planning permission on the back that it doesn't meet the planning balance as I understand it.
Okay, now somebody else raised their hand. Councillor Sivastava.
Thank you, Chair. I think I refer to the comment by Councillor Sanderson. I think these look like improvement construction price. This place was being used, and I think there are social benefit, economic benefits. So I support the recommendation of the officer. So I second it more or less. Did you propose? Sorry.
Councillor Sandon didn't propose anything.
Chair, I'm quite happy to propose it if Councillor Stavishar is seconding it.
Seconding then.
Okay. In that case, then we'll move on to Councillor Mistry.
Thank you, Chair. Just with a clarification and from the officer, the rationale they've used in the allocation of the parking space, when you think there is 50-odd places, properties, all right, in the parking space, they mentioned about 30-odd, because this just reminds me, and I'm surprised that the county council, as usual, same thing they do with the HMOs, where they think providing cycle rack mitigates that car parking, you know. So may I ask the officer what's the rationale between the number of properties, which is 50-odd, to the parking places that is only 36?
Through you, Chair, there's only 28 units proposed, not 50. There's 28 units. Let me just get my note. Yeah, it's 28 in total, 14 in each block. 16 are only 1-bed or studio, and 12 are 2-bedroom. Therefore, the amount of parking spaces is based on Appendix 5 and those that we have in the parking standards. So that's how it's calculated, and the amount of spaces meets that. That's why there isn't the objection, because it's in line with the local plan based on the number of units that are proposed.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Councillor Bill Lewis, next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you to the office as well for an excellent report. And I agree completely with conclusions in sections 21 and 22. There'll be social, economic and environmental advantages of this proposal. One of the things that I think the Council would welcome is the fact that we're using a brownfield site for housing, and that could save greenfield sites elsewhere. I agree with Councillor Sanderson, what he's indicated as well. And generally it'll improve the area compared with what it is now. I know what I'd prefer to live next to rather than the activities that are carried out on the site at present. There's one other advantage. There's quite a comprehensive indication in the report that there'll be a contamination investigation on sites which have previously been petrol stations are well known to could have been leaking material into the surrounding ground. Well, that'll be checked, and presumably there'll be some kind of a remedial scheme proposed to clean it up so the site will end up cleaner than it is now. So I concur with Councillor Sanderson and so on with and support the proposal as it stands.
Okay, well, certainly from the site visit today as the chair, I felt that Councillor Lawrence's 3 reasons for refusal were pretty solid reasons, and I'd be inclined to second his proposal to refuse. And we can just put that on the records there. And we can now move on to the next speaker, which is Councillor Becky Mowdis.
Thank you, Chair. Just to come back to what Councillor Sanderson said, I know it is a busy site, but you've currently got a way in and a way out, and we're going to be reducing that to one way in and one way out. And whilst highways don't have grounds for objection, they did say that approximately 14.4 metres from the public highway carriageway, the proposed access road narrows to around 3 metres. Whilst this may present any direct impacts on the adopted highway when viewed in isolation, it may lead to safety issues within the site. And I think looking at the plan, if you could put the plan back up, please, Lucy. The one with the pink, the colourful one. I think looking at the plan, I don't know, but the block on the left, there doesn't seem to be any pedestrian access into the main site. It's straight off that 3 metre road, which I think is, for me, somewhat of an oversight and a safety issue. I think it's an overdevelopment of the site. Again, some great points made about, residential and brownfield, but I think 28 flats, that's up to 40 people. I think my calculations are 2 bed and 1 bed, up to 40 people. I don't think parking is enough for that. I know it meets standards, but when you're talking of visitor parking, again, today we were at the site visit, and we created such a disturbance because there was nowhere for us as visitors to park, and it created all kinds of chaos on that road. I certainly wouldn't want to cycle on that road. The roads adjoining that, I wouldn't want to cycle. We all said what a busy roundabout it was, and we all wouldn't want to go over that. So I'd like to support Councillor Lawrence's objections. Thank you.
And don't forget that our car parking standards are not a maximum, they're just guidance. So it's up to you to strike the balance. So we've got another speaker, Councillor Harrington.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in 2 minds because I see this in my ward all the time and they get put through no problems at all. But when it's in the village, people will go, oh my goodness, what's going on? But I do see it's overdeveloped because there's not enough spaces there. We've caused a bit of an issue today as well. But then that street's really strange. I mean, I've actually walked down that street and delivered leaflets, and all the houses are different. There's not one standardised house. So for me personally, I think they all can be different. And if you look at the house across the road, it looks really nice when we were talking to Chair about it as well. But also you have got obviously a hospital around the corner, which obviously that's going to be great for people, affordable housing for nurses and doctors and things like that. But the thing I really need to know about is we're putting these cycle racks in, but we're not having we're not having everything go into it. So I would like to know, when's this cycle route going to be done? Because it seems like we're putting all these provisions in, we're whacking the houses in, we're whacking everything in, but there's no infrastructure to go with it. So is there a plan from highways? Because again, highways are not here tonight and their report is not as good as it could be. We're sticking houses in without the actual infrastructure to go with it. So have we got any dates of when this is going to happen? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. No, I'm not aware of the dates of when the County Council would be carrying that out.
Right, we've got Councillor Ward next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I wanted to echo what Councillor Lawrence said about the business side, because obviously this is essentially looking at changing the usage from what we saw today was quite a busy business, you know, quite a, I would say, a thriving business, which is good to see. And so to start with, that asks the question, do we want to change the usage of the site from a business in the first place? I'd also like to echo what Councillor Timms, who's obviously had to leave the room now, what she mentioned about, although there is quite a lot of traffic at the moment because it's a successful business, that's during the day. You know, that's more your 9 to 5, 8 to 5 or something like that. This would then increase the traffic in the evenings. On essentially, if you look at the other properties along the road, you would be talking maybe, I don't know, about 4 properties along there. All of a sudden you're talking 28 sets of accommodation. So I just think it's a big increase, and I do agree that it's not in keeping with all the other properties along the road. So yeah, I'm happy to reject the application.
Okay, got any further speakers on this?
Just one point, Chair. Could we have Councillor Lawrence clarify his grounds for refusal? It may be very relevant at some time in the future.
I think I was fairly clear, and I think the minutes will show that. It was planning balance. There was 3 factors. There were 3 factors on planning balance. First is social. Our housing levels are being met by the borough, so you cannot argue on counts of housing because housing need is met. The second is environmental. This is putting in a large number of properties. It's using gas boilers. There hasn't been any sign of solar heating or any of those measures. I also think there's no contribution to biodiversity and things like that, potentially from this site as well, but I can check through those minutes. And the third one is economic. It is taking out a business. And as we've seen and discussed, it is a thriving business. It's offering services to this rural community. I have also said I think it's inappropriate density. It's a 3-storey building, so I don't think it's appropriate development for this area. So I haven't said there shouldn't be any development. I just think as a 3-storey building, it is totally inappropriate, as there is no 3-storey buildings along this area. I think I could add more, but I think that's sufficient.
Okay, from what you've said, it looks like certainly regarding the local plan and the Bentley Woods have met their housing need. The loss of services, I think, in the local plan is HS3, and intensity of the design is SDC1, from my memory, which is limited.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just comment on the discussion that we've had about reasons for refusal. The starting point for all decisions is the test of sustainable development, which, like you said, part of those is the economic, the social and the environmental. But the starting point is also the local plan. So if I just talk you through the issues that you've raised, and also take you back to something that you said right at the start when you started speaking. So in terms of housing, the social aspect and housing need, housing targets are minimum housing targets. They're not maximum housing targets. So you when assessing applications, it's not the case we've met the target, therefore we don't approve any more housing, because it's only a minimum target. So I would advise members that that is not grounds in which this application should be considered. It's also within the built-up area where, by definition, under the National Planning Policy Framework, development is acceptable unless there are material considerations that indicate otherwise. And this is in the built-up area. In terms of they are installing gas boilers, the council's got policies on sustainability measures. There is no requirement that every property has to have something other than a gas boiler. That's not a planning policy requirement. It is being looked at through building regs legislation, but it's not a planning reason to refuse the application on. In terms of other environmental factors, they are set out in the report, and the officer states that it's not contrary to any of those factors. In relation to the economic, the current use of the site is what's called sui generis, which means that it doesn't fall into a particular use class. So that employment site is not protected for employment use. So it's not within the gift of the local planning authority to determine that another use cannot come forward on that site if that other use is acceptable in all other planning terms. So the fact that it's a thriving business, it's unfortunate if that thriving business is to go, but it's not a means by which we could refuse this planning application before us this evening. The owner of the site wishes to have a different use on there. It's for us to consider whether that different use is acceptable. So going back to something that I think you started off by saying in terms of your reason for refusal, which was talking about the height, the mass, the density that was out of character with the area. And I think Councillor Maudis mentioned overdevelopment. Now, they are matters which are matters for you, that I consider are matters to be considered as part of this application. It's a judgment for members to come to. Officers have come to the judgment that those matters in terms of height, mass and density are acceptable in planning terms, but that is very much for members to judge. And Lucy, do you want to just put the street scene up again? So we talked about it being 3-storey, or it's 2-storey with rooms in the roof, because it's 2 stories up to eaves and then room accommodation within the roof space. Now, if members feel that looking at that street scene, that the design of those properties in terms of their height, mass and density result in the development being out of keeping with the surrounding area, then that would be a reason for refusal, because that would be contrary to policy SDC1. I would say that is your stronger reason for refusal than the other issues that we've talked about. Just to address the car parking issue, the Highway Authority considers that there is sufficient car parking, and we probably have this discussion on every single application, not just at this council, but probably at every planning authority every month across the country. This same discussion will be had. What highways are assessing is what harm not having enough car parking that we might think is enough car parking would have on the highway. And that is about measuring highway safety. Is there going to be a highway safety? Is it going to be displacement of car parking that is going to lead to a highway safety issue? That's what the Highway Authority have to consider in relation to the NPPF, and that's what we have to consider in relation to the NPPF. Now, the local Highway Authority don't consider there is a impact on highway safety as a result of this application. And unless we have other information that we believe that the local highway authority are not in the possession of, they are the technical consultees with regard to highways matters. So I think members need to think very carefully about whether they want to include that as a reason for refusal as well. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you for the advisement there. I do think there is I think there is a planning balance question to be answered here, and it doesn't satisfy me that it does that. But as I first stated on my rejection, it was due to the three-storey level of the building and the massing of that building and being appropriate compared to the others. I look at those pictures and I see a dense picture in the middle. Okay, I don't see the other side of the street, which is similarly not dense. So I think it's the density, the massing, the three-storey nature of the property is my reasons for rejection, and I take it that way. Okay.
Councillor Superstar.
You mentioned, officer mentioned about highway safety issue to the car parking. They have made assessment and they've got no objections, so that must have considered this.
Councillor Harrington.
Thank you for that. Highway safety, obviously I've used that down the years. What report have they got? Because obviously I have previous experience of having no data. So what report have we got? And also, has there any been improvement of the reporting of highway safety to this committee? Because an A4 piece of paper to say it's approved and these are reasons why, it's not really a way for a planning committee to scrutinise any sort of planning application, and also it's not fair on the planners either. So where they're getting the data from, for me, and is this going to be another one which we won't know because they don't send the data to us?
Through you, Chair, the information was based on the road safety audit that was provided to the Highways Authority as a part of the application. Just to point on a few of the other things that have been raised in the discussion, I know that the gas boilers have been pointed out, and based on the proposed conditions, there is the restrictions on that, linking to the type that would be used, linked also to air quality. And I know that there's a number of environmental issues that have been raised, but I would just reiterate that the proposed scheme would provide a biodiversity net gain to that is currently there.
Okay, we've got the legal officer going to respond.
Through you, Chair, thank you. In terms of highway safety, we all know in terms of the NPPF that bar is incredibly high. What we have to rely on are the comments from the highway safety experts, our statutory consultees, the County Council, and at paragraph 10.2 of the report, at page 10 in front of you this evening, the Highways Authority, who are experts on highways matters, have no objection to this application, subject to the conditions at 14 and 19 of the draft conditions as set out in the report.
Councillor Harrington.
Yeah, it does say that, but it doesn't say the dates of when they did the assessment. So the problem is, how old is this assessment? And this should be in the report. So if the data's 5-10 years old, we can't really use that. I just want to know what sort of data it is, and that would be my question.
Through you, Chair. I think the difference with this application in relation to the HMOs that I think you're comparing this to, the HMO applications are householder applications. Because this is a major application, it needs to be accompanied by a transport assessment and a road safety audit. Now, those are required as part of the planning application. They are all available online to be submitted for anyone to view. They're on there now. They have to meet the county council's requirements in terms of when the surveys were done, that it wasn't in the school holidays, that it was at certain times of the day. So there is very, very stringent requirements on those road safety audits and the transport assessments which have been submitted with this application to allow the local highway authority to come to that conclusion. It is different when it's a HMO because those things aren't required for HMO applications, which is why then when we're looking at parking surveys and things like that, that's when county is saying they don't have the information. But on a major application, the onus is on the applicant to provide the county council with that information to be submitted with the application, and then it's all assessed as part of the overall application. And I've just been told that it was done in July and October 22, so within the last 12 months.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, right now, I think there's been quite a healthy debate on that. I think we'll move to the vote in the order that the proposals came before us. So we've got a proposer and a seconder for approval. All those in favour of approval, please show. All those against, please show.
6.
And I'll use my casting vote.
6, and the chairman's casting vote.
So that was 6 and 6, and I'm afraid I used my casting vote, so that fails. And then we move now to the next vote, which is refusal. All those in favour of refusal, please show. Okay. And that was 6. And all those against, please show. Okay, 6. So my casting vote again. So that is actually refused on the casting vote of the chair. Reason for refusal, SCD1.
That is
SDC1.
the policy. What was the reason for refusal? That's the policy to link that back. The reason for refusal being? Height, mass, density, overdevelopment, out of keeping.
Okay, that's we'll better move on to the next item, which is again Lucy again with the Crown Inn.
Nope, Ruth. No.
Ruth is Ruth. Oh, that's over there. Goodness me, Ruth.
Oh, that Ruth.
Yes, there she is. Come on in, Ruth. So it's Ruth James going to present.
Good evening. This development is for the construction of a pair of 3-bed semi-detached dwellings on the car park of the Crown Inn public house. It includes the reconfiguration of beer garden and car park for the pub. It's being reported to Planning Committee for determination because it has been called to committee by Councillor Abian and 15 or more letters of objection have been received. The first slide just shows a general picture of the inn with its car park from the street. So here we see the layout plan. The Crown Inn occupies a generous sized plot which provides a good level of separation distance with adjacent neighbours. The smallest amount of that separation is 14 metres on this side. It sits at the intersection of 4 roads and the junction is very busy. To the southwest Over here, there are local shops and facilities. To the southeast is a care home, just here. The area in red indicates where the development will go and how much of the existing site will be taken up. So some site photographs on the left-hand side here shows the junction with the block of flats on the corner. To the right is the car park area where the new dwellings would be built. The Crown Inn has 2 access points from the highway. The left-hand photo shows the access onto Main Street, and the right-hand photo shows the access onto Brownsover Road. Both access points are close to the junction. These photos show the proximity of West House here to the application site. Currently, the first floor and rear windows have a very open aspect out across the car park area. So in the originally submitted scheme, which you can see here on version 1, the dwellings were to be located to the northeast corner of the site as shown here. The gardens were too small and the required back-to-back distances could not be achieved between residential dwellings. The garden of West House would also have been impacted, causing an overbearing effect and loss of sunlight to the rear garden. Following these concerns, an amended scheme was submitted, as is shown in the right-hand slide. This pulled the dwellings forward, reconfiguring the gardens and parking for them. Although the new position resolves the garden sizes, it's not resolved concerns regarding the loss of parking for the Crown Inn and the impact towards West House. Concerns in regard to noise nuisance also remain. The above drawing shows how the new dwellings would look from within the street scene. They're positioned here in the centre, and they're higher than the eastern neighbour, West House. Currently, this area provides a visual break from the street scene with a car park gap, and this would be infilled. There's a sense of openness within this area, part of the in the public realm. So the space around the care home here and the green area to the front of the flats. The highway is also very wide at this point, and there's a lot of planting as a strong verdant quality. It's considered that the dwellings are going to encroach upon this, which fails to respond to the character of the area or add to its overall quality. So the key considerations are the principle of development. The application is located within Rugby Town, which is the main focus for development within the borough, and the principle of development is therefore acceptable, subject to the proposed development complying with other development plan policies. In terms of character and design, whilst the revised scheme has resolved the concerns in regards to the garden sizes and back-to-back distances with rear properties, it's also brought the built form forward within the site, giving it a higher level of visibility within the street scene. The dwellings, as said, would encroach into this open and verdant character of the street scene, and this would fail to add to the overall quality of the area in accordance with policy SDC1. Residential amenity. The harm towards West House would be significant and unacceptable, taking away the open aspect of the property to its southwest side. Although the first floor window serves a landing and stairs, this open aspect materially enhances the living conditions of the occupants of West House. There would be a sense of enclosure towards West House, which would be oppressive and overbearing. The resulting loss of sunlight and daylight would compound this harm. In terms of noise, the noise report provided states that the noise associated with the local area, public house garden and the car park would not have an adverse impact on the residential dwellings, providing the mitigation measures are undertaken at the site. So part of this mitigation, it would require the residents to shut themselves in to the properties, closing all the windows if it was too noisy. From a design perspective, this is unacceptable as it negatively affects the way the building would function and also means that the gardens could be unusable due to noise. The noise report that was submitted with the application has suggested the use of other mechanical ventilation. However, none of that has been included with the plans and no evidence of that has been provided. So the advice within the noise report has not been followed in this case. Right, parking and highways. At the time of writing the report for committee, a final response from Highways to the technical note was still to be received. This has now been provided and comments are as follows. The methodology for the parking survey was not agreed beforehand, and so it is unclear as to whether it can be considered robust. The dates chosen for the survey did not include a weekday survey for comparison with the weekends. Deliveries made outside opening hours require a delivery management plan to be provided to ensure that this is controlled. The manoeuvres shown in the tracking plan are not supported due to the acute angle the vehicle exits the site, in which it will exit the site. Concerns re the parking arrangement for the dwellings remain. Some of them are too small, one is to the front. The busyness of the junction may make the use of on-street parking unsuitable, resulting in obstructions to the carriageway visibility displays and delays. The parking survey submitted has shown that existing parking provision of 17 spaces is adequate. In reducing the available parking, there would clearly be an overflow onto on-street parking. Warwickshire County Council Highways have objected to the proposal, stating that the parking provision should, as a minimum, be retained at the existing level for the pub. The parking standards of policy D2 have not been met, resulting in inadequate and unsatisfactory parking facilities for the pub. And finally, a conflict of use. Policy SDC1 states proposals for housing will not be permitted near to or adjacent sites where there is potential for conflict between the uses, while Section 15 of the National Planning Policy Framework states that it's the responsibility of the planning authority to ensure the new development can be integrated effectively. In this particular case, it is considered that the development would not achieve this integration. The potential for noise nuisance complaints to cause problems for the business could lead to a curtailment of the functioning of the venue by way of unreasonable restrictions placed upon the business from other legislative regimes. So in the planning balance, whilst the proposal accords with policy GP2, the development would impact on the character and appearance of the street scene. The new houses would have an adverse impact upon the occupiers of West House. There would be harm to the future occupiers of the new dwellings because of the mitigation for dealing with noise affects the functionality of the houses and is unacceptable. The introduction of close proximity residential use within the site conflicts with the existing use, creating potential problems for the business and loss of parking. The above are not outweighed by the benefits of the jobs created during the construction or the provision of two houses. There is no future economic benefit for the Crown Inn from this development. There are some updates to the officer report. Paragraph 10.8 stated incorrectly that there was no parking facilities proposed. On the revised scheme, there are some cycle parking shown on the plan, and that entry within the officer report will be removed. And due to the subsequent consultation response since the publication of the agenda, the conditions are to be amended as shown on this slide. The first reason for refusal about encroaching into the open, verdant character within the street scene. On the second reason, it runs parallel with the side elevation of West House and would result in overbearing and adverse impact upon this property. Reason for refusal 3, the development would reduce the off-street parking provision provided by the car park for the Crown Inn, resulting in reliance upon on-street parking for users of the public house. And the level of parking retained for the public house is not in accordance with RBC parking standards. Reason 4, the location of the development in close proximity to public house would create a level of noise and disturbance that would be detrimental to the amenities of future occupiers. The mitigation measures supplied by the agent of change do not address the potential for disturbance to residential private amenity space. The use of mechanical ventilation via windows to mitigate noise disturbance within the dwelling house is not considered acceptable, as it imposes restrictions upon the way the residential dwelling functions, and this fails to meet good design standards and fails to safeguard the living conditions of future occupiers. So the recommendation is that the application should be refused as it doesn't comply with the local plan or national planning policy framework. Thank you.
Any points of clarification? Councillor Mystery.
I think the report is quite comprehensive, and it's very much a ill thought out application, and there is nothing in there that supports this application. So can I speak on the application refusal?
Have we got any other points of clarification from any other members, or should we move straight into the debate? Move into the debate? Okay. Carry on then, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. This is very much a ill thought out application because it doesn't even meet the basic condition for the planning rules that we have in place, and it shouldn't even been here, I think. And just want to give you a bit of background that the actual Crown Pub is a community hub in the middle of a new bowl village, and it's well supported. It's a focus of activity for various fundraising, youth meeting, etc., that goes on, and charity work that is also taken on board. And across the road is the care home, and if people park on street with people who are using mobility scooters, etc., that will have an impact on that care home that across the road. And the most important thing is that, doesn't change the aspect of the parking space. The pub is still a pub, yeah, and to reduce it from 25 to 8, almost taking away 65% of the parking space, doesn't make sense in any sense, and whatever it is. And when you look at the opposite, it's a very busy junction. When you look at the Brownsover Road, you look at the Parkfield Road and Newbold Road. And it's also safer routes to school as well. And if you start having, there are functions during the daytime, if you have wake, etc., which will then start parking onto the street, and that will have impact on the children who are going to school, etc. And so in summary, if I look at it, and I want to add what the partial loss really means in terms of, lack of parking space, 68% reduction, and then lack of consideration for the residents of the care home with wheelchair and mobility scooter, impact of the on-street parking and safer route to school, and at late night, parking off-street will generate, which is highlighted by the officer quite rightly, the noise that will be generated, So it will have it's not sustainable development, Chair. And the thing that I would like, and which is very important in a way, that the highway has quite rightly, it's not often I see it, refusing to take on board what the councillors are shouting, and we heard that earlier item. So in terms of partial loss, some application, this is one of them, seek changes which could reduce the size of the pub, yeah, or the plot that goes with it. And in case, such changes may threaten the viability of the business, and the longer-term aims of the applicant may be to secure a redevelopment of the entire property in the future. There have been few test cases where the applicant have been refused for reason of poor business, which could result from loss of car parking or garden space, etc. They are sometimes been called Trojan horse application. I hope some officer can explain to you. And under the national...
Councillor, I'm ever so sorry to cut across. I'm sorry to cut across you, but it sounds very much like you're agreeing with the officer recommendation. If we could just move to some sort of... Yes? Do you want to move to some sort of recommendation?
1 minute. I'm using the policies, yeah? Under the National Planning Policy Framework, yeah, paragraph 92 contains the most explicit and wide-ranging policy supporting the retention of community pub. This is something that I want to take forward, not just for this one. All of the pubs in the Rugby should be secure. Paragraph 8 and 197 and especially 192 seeks to conserve heritage asset in a...
Yes, sir, it is. We're drifting straight off the subject here. Can we come to the conclusion, within the next 30 seconds, please?
Yeah. Chair, I've never interrupted anybody. You should give people a chance to speak.
But you're drifting off the subject in hand. We're looking at this application, not other applications. It's this one we're talking about.
Thank you, Chair. Anyway, listen enough. I move the recommendation that this application be refused, Chair.
Councillor Sivastava. Yeah. It was Councillor Lawrence first, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor. I actually agree with all your points, but the evening is very long. Thank you very much for the report. I would like to second the recommendation to refuse for all the reasons you state in your report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Mine was really quick. It was just literally, I've never seen an application with so many reasons for refusal. So on that basis, I'm happy to vote refusal as well. I know it's already been proposed and seconded. Thank you.
Councillor Sivastava.
I would like also to say the report is very comprehensive and all the reasons for refusal is summarised very well. I was going to second Councillor Lawrence has seconded it.
We've got Nicola to say a few words.
Just as a point of clarification, the reasons for refusal that members are considering tonight are not those that are set out in the officer's report. They are those that were shown on the screen in front of you. And just as a point of clarification, that it is the reasons as set out there that you wish to vote on this evening.
Thanks for all the points noted. Yeah, well done. Right, we'll move to the vote if there's no more speakers. So all those in favour of refusal, please show. And that is unanimous. Well done. We're now going to move on to the last one for consideration tonight, which is by Art Place. And we've got Paul Varnish to... OK, Paul?
Thank you, Chair. This application has been reported to Planning Committee for determination because the proposed development falls within the definition of major development and is an application submitted by the Council. It is a full application for the erection of 100 dwellings with associated access roads, car parking and landscaping. This presentation is read in conjunction with the committee report and documents submitted within the planning application. The application site is located within the Eastlands ward, within the urban area of the borough. The site was previously occupied by 2 brutalist high-rise apartment blocks and 8 maisonettes, which have recently been demolished. Regarding the site context, to the east and west of the site are traditional Victorian terrace properties. To the north and east is the railway, which acts as a boundary edge for the urban area. To the south of the site is Clifton Road, with the larger terraced Edwardian terrace properties. There's also a parade of shops and a public house. To the south, beyond Clifton Road, is Winfield Recreation Ground and the properties on Butlin Road and Townsend Road. To the west is the town centre, which is approximately 1 mile away. The proposed development will provide 100% affordable rented housing and flats to be retained and managed by Rugby Borough Council, to include 4 blocks of flats, which will provide 60 1- and 2-bed flats. 10 masonettes to provide 20 one-bed units. Apologies. Sorry, 10 masonettes to provide 20 one-bed units and 20 2-, 3- and 4-bed dwellings. Policy H2 informal housing mix, as guided by the strategic housing market assessment, will require 20% of housing to be affordable. To development provides 100% affordable housing. The table provides a guide to the recommended mix of properties. The development does not adhere to the suggested mix. However, the mix and tenure has been requested by the local authority's housing team based on the current and projected demand of the borough's social housing needs and regarding the previous on-site social housing provision. The planning authority received no representation or comments from neighbours or councillors during the statutory consultation period. Responses were received from Councillor Roodhouse and Councillor Sanderson requesting for the existing puffing crossing to be upgraded to a toucan crossing and for improvements to be made for a safe walking route towards Winfield Recreation Ground, towards Easton School and St Andrews School, and for an improved cycle route from the bottom of South Street to connect to Abbey Street and St Andrews Bend Primary School. Highways issues will be addressed later within the presentation. The key issues to consider when determining an application are the principle of development, promoting a healthy, safe and inclusive community, provision of open space, sports facilities and recreation, dwelling type and tenure, character and design, residential amenity, highway safety, parking, environmental health to include air quality, flooding and drainage, landscape and ecology. There are also other matters which will need to be addressed via legal agreements. Regarding the principle of development, the application site is located within the urban edge, which is the main focus and most sustainable location for all development in the borough, providing residents with good access to recreational facilities, employment, local shops, services, schools and community facilities. It is also considered previously developed land where redevelopment will be supported, providing it does not result in an unacceptable impact on visual amenity, biodiversity or the potential intensification of the land. The development, once completed, will utilise the whole site. The larger 3-storey properties will be positioned to the front of the site, adjacent to Clifton Road, with the 2-storey dwellings and masonettes being positioned towards the central area and to the north of the site. The dwelling houses, masonettes, will incorporate private gardens, a shed for cycle storage, an electric charging vehicle point and a car parking space or spaces, depending on the property size. The flats will incorporate unallocated parking, electric charging points, refuse stores and cycle storage. The existing internal access road will be retained and extended to provide a loop for easy vehicular movement throughout the site. Vehicle access to the site is via the existing access off Clifton Road. The existing South Street vehicular access will be retained but only for pedestrian use as a footway and cycleway. The site will include an integrated landscaping scheme and all the properties will all incorporate an air source heat pump and photovoltaic panels. In terms of design and appearance, the above is an illustration of the proposed development. The top picture depicts the street scene to the front of the site as viewed from Clifton Road. The bottom picture illustrates the view towards the dwelling houses to the rear of the site. The dwellings and masonettes are all 2-storey and will incorporate detailing similar to the properties on Clifton Road. Additionally, the properties include modern design features to include the large grey frame windows to re-image the nearby Victorian and Edwardian housing types in a contemporary style. The flats are 3-storey and provide a strong prominent frontage similar to the other properties located on Clifton Road and incorporate design features to include cast stone heads and sills, brick and stone band courses and grey frame detailing. The applicant has provided a material distribution plan and material samples which will add variety and interest. The car parking, refuse stores, cycle stores and any associated brick boundary walls and fencing have been positioned to appear less prominent, with the boundary treatment and landscaping ensuring there is a positive impact on the visual amenity of the street scene. The flats do not have their own private garden area, however the Winfield Recreation Ground is located across the Clifton Road. The dwelling houses and masonettes all incorporate a garden, although several gardens are smaller than the guidance figure in terms of square meterage. All of the properties will have access to their own private garden, whereas the previous occupiers of the high-rise flats didn't. The proposed development has been assessed against national space standards In conclusion, the development will provide at least the recommended minimum gross internal floor area for each property and will be in general accordance with the other recommended technical requirements. The above shows an example of the masonettes and dwelling houses. The masonettes include a combined kitchen, living room, bedroom and bathroom across a single floor. The dwelling houses typically include a living room and kitchen dining area at ground floor and 2, 3 or 4 bedrooms and a bathroom at first floor. The flats are either 1 or 2 bedroom and include a kitchen, dining, living room, bedroom and bathroom. Sorry, a combined kitchen, dining and living room and then a bedroom and bathroom. The roof includes an access stairs and air source heat pumps and solar panels. Regarding residential amenity, as a guide, the local authority would recommend a separation distance of approximately 21 metres between properties and 14 metres if the rear of the dwelling is facing onto a blank side elevation. Generally, there is a separation distance of at least 21 metres between the proposed dwellings and the established dwellings on East Street, South Street and Golding Court and Clifton Road, where the distance is less. For example, at 9 and 10 Golding Court, the rear windows from the proposed dwelling will face onto a blank side elevation. A condition will be included to ensure windows within the nearest side elevation of flats adjacent to the Clifton Inn will be obscure glazed at first floor level and above. Regarding the relationship between the proposed properties, where the guide figure of 21 metres has not been adhered to, the property will be separated by a highway where views will be less private, or the windows is considered to be secondary and could be obscure glazed or blinds could be fitted, or views are restricted by boundary treatment, or the views are angled towards another property. It's accepted that the 21 metre guidance figure has not always been achievable. However, any potential overlooking or loss of privacy would not be beyond that usually associated with this type of development within an urban area. Separation distances and the size and scale of properties would prevent there being a perception that a dwelling, house, flat or masonette is overbearing, in particular where the land levels vary between the proposed properties to the north boundary and the established adjacent properties at Golding Court. Regarding highways, the application is accompanied by a transport assessment to include details of the existing site in relation to pedestrian access, cycle access, public transport, etc. The development proposal to include vehicular access, parking, trip generation and transport impacts. Warwickshire County Council Highways initially objected to the development and requested additional information in relation to the transport assessment and amendments in addition to the on-site walking and cycling provision. The amending plans include additional drop curves with tactile paving, lockable gates to the cycle stores, all houses and masonettes to be provided with a lockable garden shed. Plans to indicate acceptable vehicle manoeuvring on-site to include delivery vans and South Street, Bike Place and within the site. They also requested a road safety audit. Just to clarify as well from the previous question, the transport assessment was done in February 2023, and the road safety assessment was done within the last few weeks. Highways have assessed the information and have reversed their objection, subject to conditions to ensure that the highway infrastructure, including on-site and access, is satisfactorily implemented in accordance with the relevant plans and documents and in conjunction with Warwickshire County Council Highways. They have also requested a construction management plan. If approved, the proposed conditions will be included within the revised decision notice. Regarding the cycleway, whilst it is appreciated that the Council would always seek to provide improvements connected to any new development, it is considered that in this instance, the additional cycleway improvements would be unreasonable and not comply with the National Planning Policy Framework, which requires planning applications to be necessary to development to make it acceptable, directly related to development, and fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind to the development. The previous high-rise apartment blocks provided 132 residential units for a maximum of 432 people. The proposed development will provide 100 residential units for a maximum of 265 people. The likelihood is that there will be an overall reduction in residents who would use a cycleway. There is an existing safe crossing for cyclists via the Puffin Crossing. The upgrade from a Puffin Crossing to a Toucan Crossing will not provide safer crossing for pedestrians. Highways have clarified a Toucan Crossing is used where there is off carriageway cycle facility on both sides of the crossing, otherwise the crossing facility has to remain as one for pedestrians only. This development is relying on government funding to provide the 100% affordable social housing to the local community. There is a realistic prospect that the cost implications of adding the construction of the cycleway could make the scheme unviable. Regarding parking, the application site is located within the low access zone, approximately 400 metres from the high access zone boundary. The high access zone is the area to include the town centre immediate area, considered to be the most sustainable within walking and cycling distances of services and facilities, as well as being accessible to public transport. Although not within the high access zone, the car parking provision has been assessed against this standard due to the site being located within walking distance of many local facilities and amenities to include a convenience store, the post office, public house and recreation ground, being close to schools, and the town centre being a 20-minute walk or a 5-minute cycle ride away. Additionally, the agent has provided data which demonstrates social housing tenant base for 1 and 2 bedroom properties has significantly less demand for parking than the local plan standards. The proposed car parking, cycle storage provision and electric vehicle charging points adheres with the guidance provided for the development typology within a high access zone. Environmental health raised no objections subject to conditions for a construction management plan to include control of dust levels relating to air quality, a contaminated land condition and noise condition. Regarding traffic generation and air quality, noise and vibration, the air quality assessment submitted in conjunction with the application is considered to be acceptable. The application is accompanied by an energy statement which provides details of how the development will incorporate solar photovoltaic panels, air source heat pump and a fabric-first approach to reduce carbon emissions. The Landscaping Office has provided a response of no objection subject to conditions regarding the implementation of a soft landscaping scheme and a condition regarding tree protection. The lead local flood authority does not consider the proposed drainage strategy to be sustainable in comparison to the industry best practice standards. However, they recognise that as the development is subject to grant funding for social housing and the site was previously brownfield, there's limited scope to improve the sustainable drainage design. Conditions will be included relating to a verification report and a maintenance plan. The Work Surface Unit, Warwickshire Police, the Fire Service and Cadent National Grid have raised no objection, subject to informatives to be included within the decision notice. The Environment Agency have provided a response of no comment. Corporate Property, Severn Trent and Stagecoach, the local bus company, have provided no representation. Planning applications have been sought by the local plan authority to mitigate the impacts of development and make the development acceptable. Ecology have requested a financial contribution to provide an off-site biodiversity net gain and a condition requiring the applicant to provide a biodiversity enhancement and management plan detailing habitat features to be retained, created and enhanced, and their long-term management, details of a wildlife enhancement scheme. In conclusion, it's considered that the development is in principle acceptable and addresses the key material planning considerations. Whilst the key material planning considerations relating to this application are acceptable for this development, it is recognised that the proposed layout and on-site landscaping could have been improved. However, consideration must be given to the physical constraints of the site in comparison to previous development and a recognised need within the borough for social housing. The previous development included 2 blocks of high-rise flats and masonettes. The flats incorporated multi-stories and were able to accommodate many residents, much more than the proposed development on a much smaller footprint. The pressing need for affordable housing and to try and provide a similar number of units means that development will occupy a larger footprint across the site. However, there will be less opportunity to include landscaping, and in some circumstances the separation distance between properties is less than the recommended guidance figure. The proposed units are identified more energy efficient and desirable mix of 2-storey housing and masonettes and 3-storey apartments, with the occupiers of the residential housing and masonettes all having access to their own private garden. On balance, it is concluded that the proposed development will provide much needed social housing based on the current and projected needs of the borough's projected demands of the borough's social housing needs with regard to the previous on-site social housing provision. The benefits of the development far outweigh any identified harm that would arise from the future occupiers of dwellings or neighbouring properties. Moreover, it has been demonstrated that development would result in significant social and environmental benefits as well as economic benefits. Planning obligations set out in a legal agreement will address adverse impacts of the development, ensuring it's acceptable in planning terms. the proposal complies with the local plan and MPPF. The recommendation is for the Planning Committee to approve the application subject to conditions and informatives for the completion of a legal agreement to secure the necessary financial contributions and or planning obligations, and for the Chief Officer of Growth and Investment to be given delegated authority to make minor amendments to the conditions and to negotiate and agree the detailed terms of the legal agreement, which may include the addition to, variation of, or removal of financial contributions and or planning obligations outlined in the heads of terms within this report. Thank you, Chair.
Paul, points of clarification. Points of clarification, Councillor Lawrence first.
Thank you for the report, very comprehensive. I think you mentioned other technical regulation certifications, so the question I have is around people with reduced mobility. One, verifying that the building will be built to those standards, and two, the fact that they may not be very suitable, the flats, because they have stairs and no lifts, but within the site there is sufficient property there for people who are maybe wheelchair users.
Councillor Sanderson next.
Through you, Chair. There has been provision for disability parking on site with parking spaces that are larger. In terms of the internal layout, this has been guided by housing, so it would with any kind of new property, I believe it will be up to the disability standard. There's been no sort of additional request or provision provided by the our housing team, so it would just be generally what the standard design of required by the National Housing Bill.
Through your Chair, can I also add, in terms of building control, any new development is built according to current standards, so low level access, low door handles. In terms of DDA, that's the standard that's complied with.
That was the confirmation, just for the record, that was after. Thank you.
Right, now we've got Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm pleased to hear that the ground floor flats will be DDA compliant, which was one of my concerns as well. Thank you. Also, can I thank Paul for all his help in looking at things like biodiversity gain? It's not in the report, but Paul was able to confirm today, and he may want to confirm this with members, that we can look at biodiversity offsetting at the viaduct mound, which is literally a stone's throw from the development. Can you confirm that?
Through you, Chair. I'll confirm all the biodiversity net gain. There will be limited biodiversity net gain on site. Unfortunately, due to site constraints, there needs to be some external as well, off-site. There's an identified site, which Councillor Sanderson just mentioned, which is the viaduct mound, which is earmarked for, I think, for some enhanced grassland. Also, on top of that as well, there is scope for more units of biodiversity net gain within sort of close proximity to the site.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, one point of clarification was in the report. There was the request from UHCW about, I believe it was just short of 180,000 contributions. The reason I'm asking this question is I don't believe everything you see on social media, but you see people saying, oh, the council are in conflict with UHCW over the contributions. Am I right in thinking this would have been through a Section 106, but with this development, that's not the case because it's less than what was there before? Does that kind of make sense, that question?
I mean, actually, it is as sort of as almost as straightforward as you set out there. All planning obligations, so Section 106, have to comply with section 122 of the SIL regulations. And therefore, we have to do those SIL tests on any planning obligation that any consultee or any individual puts forward. Now, obviously, Section 106 or planning obligations are collected to mitigate the impact of development on the surrounding area through the additional residents or the additional impact that's received. This site, however, had existing residential development on it, and in normal circumstances the application in front of you would be to demolish the buildings on site and replace them with other buildings. Now, in this particular instance, the buildings have already previously been demolished, but effectively there was 132 residential properties on the site, some which were larger than what's now proposed, which was why the number of residents on average was 432 people. It's been replaced with 100 residential properties with an average of 265 residential people. So in terms of what are the additional impacts on social infrastructure in the surrounding area, well, there are no additional impacts because actually there are less properties being replaced to replace those that have been recently demolished. And it's for those reasons that officers consider that they don't meet the tests under Regulation 122, and therefore the recommendation is to members that those planning obligations, that it isn't just the health one, it's the education ones as well, that they, in this instance, don't meet the tests and those shouldn't be applied. And Chair, I don't know if our legal officer wants to make any comment on that as well.
Again, through you, Chair, obligations are not just a shopping list of what services, surrounding service would require, as has been expressed by the Chief Officer, that they have to meet the SIL tests. And in this case, it is absolutely quite clear that less residents, that doesn't require more payment. The same for education.
Thank you. That's exactly what I thought. Yeah, I just wanted that clarification. Thank you.
Councillor Simpson-Starmer.
Thank you, Chair. This is completely... Obviously, we are talking about sustainable development. The last 2 years have changed our views due to COVID-19. People are working from home and the general design. So what the planning considerations are to the new development in those views?
Through you, Chair. The development has... there's been a lot of consultation between the housing team. It's come through them at their request. The properties are one-bedroomed, or mainly one-bedroomed or two-bedroomed, because that's the need in the borough. So I think I understand your point that maybe there isn't room for office space and stuff, but like I say, it's been driven by our housing team. That's what they've requested, and they in terms of their needs and what the borough needs.
Thank you again. Just to further clarify through you, Chair, that clearly this development, in terms of the local plan and the NPPF, there's been no variation in NPPF policy following on from COVID. So this proposal, in terms of officer recommendation, it's compliant. Thank you.
Councillor Lewis, next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got a query about the number of 4+ bedroom properties. In Rugby and Orsted, we've had at least 2 requests in recent times for such large properties, and they're very scarce in availability in the town. And I know housing keep a list of a record of how many requests they get. I noticed the table at paragraph 9.3 of the report indicates that the SHMA has a target for such properties of 5 to 10%. The actual is just 4%. So I wondered whether housing had given you any kind of figures regarding requirements.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, generally speaking, the housing mix should comply with the strategic housing market assessment. Because this is quite a different application, it's replacing an existing council-owned affordable housing flat with new affordable housing. We haven't gone along with that guidance. Like I say, I think, generally speaking, we've been guided by our local authority housing team, been, I think, probably experts on it and probably the ones that know what's kind of needed, what the demand is. So I take your point that there is sort of fewer 4-bed, sort of very low percentage, but we've been guided by them. It's not something we've kind of questioned, really.
Okay. Well,
just concerned that it was perpetuating the shortfall in that kind of property. So, thanks.
Figure, it says, if I've got it, apologies, I'm not sure I have. I know that the percentage of what's needed in regards to 1-bed is a very high percentage in comparison to what's needed with the larger 4-bed. I haven't got, unfortunately, I haven't got it to hand. But like I say, it's been this has been requested, and we've been guided by a housing team on this.
So yes, it does look to me. It does look to me as though the design has been, hinged around the demand. So that's what we got before us. So have we got Councillor Sivastava next?
I think it's a great development. It was needed for a long time. I used to live in Clifton Road. I know the area very well as well. So I support the proposal of recommendation.
Right, we've moved on to the debate, have we? All right, okay. Councillor Mrs Maudis.
Thank you, Chair. Oh.
Sorry,
Chair,
Councillor Maudis.
I still have a...
It looks like we've got Councillor Sanders.
Yeah, it's another point.
Final point.
Another point of clarification. Very rarely do we get a recommendation from Warwickshire County Council when it comes to highways. Yet in this report, the county has specifically asked for an upgrade of the Pelican Crossing to a higher standard. Now, we may well remember applications there's not that long ago when we refused an application on highway grounds. The takeaway at the corner of South Street and Clifton Road. And that was on highway grounds. Now, yes, I will accept that there are more, there are lower density of housing from the 132 to a 100, but I'm concerned the number of children who will be generated in family housing hasn't been taken into consideration. Can I ask the officers to explain why that hasn't happened?
Through you, Chair. This is something I did look into. At the moment, there's a puff-in crossing, which is a pedestrian crossing. So in terms of if they were to upgrade it to a toucan crossing, generally the only time they would do it, as explained by highways, is if there is a cycle route on either side of the road. So it allows somebody who's cycling along they don't have to dismount their bike, they can cycle straight across. So in terms of, because there's no cycleway, they would not request one to go in there. And in terms of the puffin crossing, it would be in a way it'd be no different for pedestrians. It wouldn't be any safer. The toucan crossing is purely for the cycleway.
We're okay to move on to the debate now. Councillor Maudis was first.
Thank you, Chair. I'm hoping there won't be much debate because I think it's a great development. I'm totally behind it. I think it's a fantastic opportunity for Rugby and its residents. If approved, the application will offer the residents of Rugby 100 affordable rented properties, with 72% of the properties being 1-bed and 87 being 1- and 2-bed, the property types with the greatest identified local need. I'm particularly pleased to see consideration shown to rising energy costs by ensuring the properties are easy and affordable to heat through the installation of air source heat pumps, The site will also make effective use of a brownfield site in an urban location, whilst also enhancing biodiversity and improving the landscape. And for those reasons, I would like to recommend the application for approval. Thank you, Chair.
We've got Councillor Ward next, and it does sound very exciting, this application, doesn't it? Because not only is it exciting, it'll be excited for the people that move into these new properties. Councillor Ward next.
Thank you, Chair. You've literally just took the words out of my mouth there. I was about to say I'm really excited by this project, but there we go. This is great. Obviously, it's 100% social housing. We know it's needed, and I'm really pleased to hear that the housing team have essentially led this on what the demand is, with the 72% for the one beds. I just think it's fantastic, and I'm happy to second Councillor Maudis's for approval. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Harrington.
You beat me, Simon. Yeah, it's a great thing. More social houses need. That minimum statement for social is we need to be doing a lot more than we are at the moment. So obviously with round gardens coming in as well. And also let's get more in, because I think with the cost of living crisis, with the mortgage crisis we've got at the moment, I think we'll need more and more social houses. So go for it.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I've had an association with this site for going back 30 years. We've had all sorts of problems there, from failing lifts to rotting carpets to poor heating to bad lighting, where people couldn't actually see who was outside their door in the old flats. They were abysmal. And the most pleasing thing we ever had was to see it being demolished. I would like, Councillor Lewis would have preferred to see more two-bedroom houses on the site rather than two-bedroom flats, because under the housing benefit rules you can put 4 people into a two-bedroom flat until the children are 11 years of age, which is a sad thing, but that's that housing benefit clawback rules. We do really think that the crossing should be considered. It's not, the current crossing there is abysmal, in a state of disrepair. It's got no safety railings and no bollards to protect children and those below a certain height from crossing that road. Now, our chief officer has delegated powers to go and talk to the county council again, but I think apart from that, I think that's the one missing factor. In terms of the cycle route, well, there are uplighters across Winfield Recreation Ground which go up to the back of Eastland School, which is a route the county council is recommending mums and kids use to stay off the road. But of course they've still got to get across Clifton Road in the first place.
Thanks for those comments, Councillor Sanderson. And we've got Nicola to respond.
Through you, Chair. I think I come back to the point that I raised earlier. This is obviously the local highway authority, and the highway authority can, at any time they so choose, make these improvements to the highway if they considered it was necessary. Are these upgrades necessary as a consequence of this development? And that's where I'm pausing and I'm saying, are they necessary as a consequence of this development? Because they weren't there when there were 132 residential units on there, and therefore. But we don't have any evidence about the future occupiers of these units, and we've also heard that there are a high proportion of one-bedroom units of which there won't be any children in. I would advise members that I don't think that whilst if this was if it was a brownfield site that had got an employment use on it and we were putting 100 residential units on there, then I would be absolutely with you, Councillor Sanderson. But the point is this is a state renewal replacing residential with residential, and unusually, we're not going up in number, we're going down in number. And it's not being provided as part of the scheme. It would have to be a Section 106 measure because it's off-site. And I'm not sure that it would meet the SIL tests for the reasons that I've already set out. This doesn't, however, stop the county upgrading that particular crossing in as the highway authority, or using money collected from other development sites around it, upgrading this crossing. But I don't think we can ask for this crossing to be upgraded as a consequence of this development.
Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to move to the vote. And so we've had a proposer and a seconder for approval. And all those in favour, please show. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. So that's all the applications for consideration tonight. The next item is an item on site visits.
Yes, through you, Chair. There's no notice of any advance warning, but members may recall at a previous planning committee earlier in the year they voted for a committee site visit in connection with application R230351 for the erection of a barn off School Street in Woolston. Councillor Willis has subsequently retracted this request, along with the need that the application should come before Planning Committee for determination. The application was refused last month, so this is just to update the members of the Planning Committee accordingly. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. The next item is the diversion of Footpath, R222 at Leamington Hastings. Is it okay? Do you want to speak on that? We've got Paul again. We just can't keep him away from the microphone.
Okay, so this is the diversion of Footpath R222 adjacent to Malvern Hall Farm, South Road on the A426 at Broadwell and Leamington Hastings. The order is made by Rugby Borough Council to stop at part of bridleway R222 and create a new bridleway to enable development to be carried out in accordance with planning permission for the demolition of an existing dwelling house and construction of a replacement dwelling house, conversion and extension of barns to a dwelling house, including demolition of agricultural buildings, construction of a building for ancillary use and stable block, and that's in previous application application reference R210887. Points A to B stopped up existing bridleway, and points A to E to F to G to B to form new bridleway. The bridleway will be 4 metres wide of natural grass surface. On the 19th of April 2023, an order under the provision of Section 257 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 was made and advertised. The effect of the order is to stop at part of bridleway R222 and create a replacement bridleway as shown on the previous slide. The recommendation, the committee is therefore asked to confirm the public order unopposed. Thank you, Chair.
Well, I'll move approval from the Chair. That's Mrs. Davis?
Yeah, I'm happy to second that, Chair.
Okay, any further speakers? Councillor Bill Lewis.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just wondered if there'd been any comments from locals about the change.
Through you again, Chair, there is a very stringent procedure in terms of advertising, leaving on deposit to give, we have to advertise it in the local press to give the opportunity. There is no objection to this. This is why it's before you today as unopposed. Had there been objection, it goes to a completely different route via inquiry.
Thanks very much. If it hasn't been seconded, I'll second it then.
Okay, it will almost certainly gone through the local parish council as well, so they've all been notified. So, okay, we've got no further speakers. We've got a proposer and a seconder for approval. All those in favour, please show. And that was unanimous again. Well, you are well behaved. Right, the next item is delegated decisions. Noted. Well done. So that concludes the business of this planning meeting. Thank you all for coming.
Members, just to make you aware, the live stream is still streaming. Through you, Chair, what I would advise members to do is to leave the chamber